website, it says that you taught yourself traditional, how do you pronounce the tribes?
Tsimshian.
Tsimshiana.
It's Sim phonetics.
Mm-hmm.
Simsheann, Tsimshian. The anglicized version, the T is dropped or silent.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what
it means people of the river of mists. That's the romantic version.
The river of what? Mist? Oh.
Is there a non-romantic version of it?
People who live along the banks of the Skeena River.
Oh.
Very cool. Is there a non-anglicized version of Tsimshian, the way it should be said?
Oh yeah, Tsimshian.
Tsimshian?
No, it's you have to say the T. Tsim.
Oh,
Sim.
Tsimshian.
Tsimshian. The word Xian is the Skeena River.
Oh.
Oh,
And the word Tsim means in. Tsim. Yeah. Yeah. So that's,
well,
the Tsimshian are divided into 4 groups, and the 3 that are left, the Tsimshian, the coast people, that's my people, and then the 2 rivers, the Nass River people and the Skitsa. There you are. I see you now.
okay, got it working.
Yay. Hi, Jacob.
Anyway, so the Gitsan people are on the upper end of upper part of the Skeena River, and the Niska people live up on the Nass River. But we're all from the same origins, just part of the language, a little bit different.
Right. So Brianna's question was, were you able to find any other traditional Tsimshian carvers that could share their stories and methods with you, or was this something you did on your own?
When I first started, I got really enthusiastic and crazy about doing it. It's the way I am. I just dive in 100% and started to just copy. I went and got X-Acto tools, and I had no one to teach me. Well, there were people I could have gone to, but I didn't know who they were at the time, non-native and native folks. And so I went and bought some books and bought a bunch of wood from a lumber yard and got some X-Acto tools and just started copying model totem poles. That's actually how I started. The first teacher really was a Tsimshian carver in Metlakatla. When I returned to Metlakatla as a school teacher, I took 2 or 3 classes from him. He's recently passed away, but he taught in this public school there in Metlakatla for maybe 30 years or so. He taught a lot of folks Northwest Coast stuff, and then so I took my first 2 or 3 classes from him, and then but the amount of time that was in those classes was cut down because people would drop out, and I'd end up being the only one left. And he would just end the class, and I'd be, oh, what? I'm all by, I'm ready to go. Let's go. But I guess he at the time didn't feel like I was worth putting his time into or something. But anyway, and then a couple years later, I saw I met a non-native carver in Washington who was really good, and asked him if I could, come and do some things for him. So I I got an Alaska Council on the Arts grant. For a summer, I went and worked with him. So in a total of 41 years, I've had about 3 months instruction from 2 different guys. And I've had no help at all on totem poles. I've made 80 full-size totem poles and dozens and dozens and dozens of models and things like that. But it all came from research and just looking at old pieces and studying museum pieces. And, yeah, I learned a little bit from both of those guys on masks and design, paddles, stuff. Hello, Isabella.
Isabella, David, Isabella.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So where are you two from? I know where Lisa is. She's in the East Coast. That's crazy. But where are you guys from?
From Central Alaska, so from Interior Alaska. I was born here, and as a kid, I moved around the lower 48 for a while, and then I came back up here when I was around 10. So I've lived here for most of my life, but I've been around the States as well.
Oh yeah.
I'm from Alaska. I've been here my whole life. I really like it here.
Yeah. What are your backgrounds? What are you guys? Are you Alaska natives or what?
My dad is just, he's white. He's from the States, and my mom was adopted from Brazil.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
My family is mostly just white. We got some long distance Dutch, Scottish, French ancestors, I'm sure, but some Irish mixed in there and Welsh. But no, we are not related to Alaska.
Well, the only reason I ask that is because sometimes people look at life differently if they come from the village, or if they're native or non-native, and it doesn't mean that somebody is better or less better than someone else. It's just curious to me to where people come from, so that I can kind of gauge what they're thinking a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
My father was from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And he's had some Osage tribe, but he was my mom Tsimshian, and I was raised by my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad. I was raised by them. I was lucky.
I grew up mostly in Hawaii, in a very tribal kind of culture, but in a very different, not Alaska Native or not indigenous, but Aboriginal. And I've been very schooled by my Hawaii Native friends to know that there is very much difference between indigenous and Aboriginal. But that's my background. But I'm very much Scottish, Irish, and I found out about a year ago, 68% Ashkenazi Jew, which I had no idea. So, gotta love DNA tests.
Well, I didn't mean to offer your question. Go ahead. I'll be quiet while you ask me.
Sorry. I actually had a question about your grandparents and your how you grew up.
Yeah.
So it says your grandparents are very self-reliant and sufficient as people that continued the traditions of living up here. And it said that this was very integral to you growing up, as you have spoken many times on it. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you spoke about, about a lack of discipline in some of today's modern culture, and perhaps an over-reliance on other things instead of self-sufficiency. Do you have any thoughts about that, on how it's affected our communities up here?
Well, that's a really broad question. I have to say first, I'm gonna step away from this, and it'll take me 1 second. I'm gonna come right back and show you something.
By the way, while he's doing that, he's in his workshop, and there's a totem he's working on right behind him. Do you guys see that?
Wow.
Yeah, I see it.
And he's got some really cool masks that he's working on that maybe he'll show you guys. But he was showing me while we were waiting for you two. David, I was just telling them also that the work behind you, that totem you're working on, and some of the masks that you were showing me, if you want to be super nice and show them before we get off, that would be awesome.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I'll kind of walk around my shop and show you there's lots of stuff going on in here. But this is Albert and Dora Bolton.
Okay.
They were born in the 1800s, and I was lucky enough to be their grandson, and they saved me. They literally saved me. My mom had a lot of alcohol problems, and anyway, she wasn't around very much when I was growing up. But these two were angels, and they took me everywhere with them. people were jealous and still give me a hard time about how everywhere that they went, they took David, you know, and I don't care. They were wonderful people. My grandfather was my hero. He lived to just about 98 years old.
Wow.
Okay.
My grandma passed when she was 80, but they were wonderful. I got to go every year, ever since I was just a tiny guy. We would go hunting and fishing and camping, food gathering, berry picking, you know, seafood, deer hunting, and everything, you know. And what I know of our language came from her. And it's a joke I tell people now. I say I sound like an old lady when I talk our language, you know, because she's the one who talked to me all the time. And neither one of my grandparents went beyond the third grade. My grandfather, I think he made it to the third grade. And I don't think my grandmother made it past first or second grade, because in those days, when the fall time came, it was time to go catch halibut or get halibut, or to go to the fish camps. So the parents took their kids out of school, and because it was a family or, you know, a communal kind of a thing and the more hands you had, the more fish you could put up and have food for the winter.
That's the original homeschooling, though.
Yeah, but I've never met a smarter man than my grandfather. He was a very smart guy, and he could do everything. He belonged to American Union. He was a pipe fitter, ran steam boilers. He ran our cannery for 50 years. It was a steam powered cannery. He ran our cannery so all the fish could be processed, and you know, he could do everything. He was a great hunter and fisherman too. Great memories and things that I got to do with them. And what your question about how things have changed, I guess is you know, one of the real glaring examples I see, and this has no dispersion toward any other race or culture, but I see a lot of our young people being affected not only by this medium that you and I are talking over right now. You know, everybody's. Have you ever seen my dance group perform? There's a 2016 celebration in Juneau. I don't know if you saw that performance or not, but there was a song that I wrote just for that performance. It's a cell phone song, and it's kind of a social commentary about the cell phone being your boss and controlling your mind, and what are you going to do without your mind? That was basically the name of the song, you know. Ni skutu it's kami ani do some. That means see that cell phone is your boss. Ni skutu it's get it naga go. He's taking your mind. Go into jabum gaun awu waga go. And what are you going to do without your mind? So anyway, there's a lot of outside influence, you know, and people, native kids, everybody is really influenced by inner city rap and that kind of culture and you know, and our culture, Alaska Native culture or Northwest Coast Native culture, it's a beautiful thing, you know, and but mom's generation, starting with my grandfather's generation, but my mom's generation and the one right after that, it was just crushed out of them. They were made to feel ashamed, and for a lot of reasons, economic reasons, churches, you know, government sanctions and rules and things like that. It just really, it was really hard. And so when it came time for me to, I came along at the right time. I always loved our culture because of my grandparents. And so when I started to, I guess I was a catalyst for the revitalization of our culture in my village. And then when I moved to Seattle too, I did the same thing with the native people here too, my own people and Tlingits and Haidas. have been lucky enough to be a positive kind of an influence on those folks.
Brianna actually has a question about that, kind of a follow-up question, if you don't mind me asking. She said, I watched a beautiful video performance of your dance group with the, is it Githuan?
Githoan.
Githuan.
Githoan means people of the salmon. GIT means people of, and Hoan is our word for salmon.
Okay, Githuan dancers. You write and choreograph new dances, but I read that your ancestors were forbidden to practice their culture. Did this prevent the passing of most of the traditional stories to be passed down, or did some of that traditional song and dance survive?
With my people, the people who are from Metlakatla, who moved from British Columbia with a missionary, they were forced to leave everything behind. They were forced to leave everything behind. And the only thing that they could keep was their the way they could gather food, and the language stayed okay for a while because the missionary that was with our people learned our language and they used it in church and things like that. But as time went by, even that has died out. In my village right now, there's one left.
Wow.
And my son David Robert, you might know of him, I'm not sure, but he's a fabulous artist. He and I lead my dance group. But he moved 5 years ago. He moved back to Metlakatla. He lives in my house. He is dedicating his life to becoming a fluent Somalic speaker, Tsimshian speaker. And
what is the name of the language again?
Somalic.
Somalic.
It means the true language. We don't speak Tsimshian. We are Tsimshian, but we speak Somali.
Right.
Now I'm getting off the subject now. What was I? Say the question again.
All right. Her question is, sorry, one second. Her question was that she watched a beautiful video performance. The main question was, did the forbidden practice of culture prevent the passing of most of the stories and dance to be passed down?
Yeah, they were punished, physically punished. My mom and my uncles were beaten, physically punished in the schools, in the boarding schools that they went with them, had mouth washed out with soap and things like that for speaking their own language. So as they grew up, they wouldn't pass it on to their kids because they didn't want their kids to have to go through the same thing, and they wanted to make it in the non-native world. And I don't blame them. Economically, you got to get a job, you pay your bills, and there were parts of town in not our village, but parts of the other towns close by where natives couldn't even go, and so all of that old tradition, the singing and dancing, the language and carving, the arts and ceremonies and things like that, potlatch, it all kind of revolves around the potlatch. If you think of the potlatch as kind of like the hub of a wheel, and everything radiates out from that. So when it was time for me I gave the first potlatch in 100 years in my village. I sponsored it to honor my grandmother, 1982. 1982. It was the first one in 100 years, the first ever in Alaska in my village. The last were done, this missionary came to our people in the 1830s, learned our language, took a whole bunch of people at the time and moved them from around this fort back to their old original villages and started this Christian village. So, and there were big, really strict rules that had to be followed in order to live there. And if you think of it in, what do you call it? A scale to weigh things. But you think on this side, boy, lots of good progress. They learned how to do all kinds of industrial things to make that community viable and successful. But on the other hand, they gave everything away that was native except at the time, their language, because they still had to speak to each other. And so when I was going to, I had never even been to a the first one. The only thing I knew about was I was trying to learn by reading stuff that I had, read about potlatch and the rules and what you needed to do and all of that. And there was no one in the village, elders, I guess you could call them, that I could go to. No one, because they were the children of the people who had moved to Alaska in the 1800s. They were the children and grandchildren of those pioneers. So it was really difficult, and I had to reach past a lot of those folks to put on this first ever totem pole and potlatch. But since then, it's come a long ways. It's really come a long ways since then. I'm really proud to say we've had lots and lots of feasts, and a lot of young people know what they're doing now, and I don't have to be there to really make me happy too, because it doesn't just belong to me, it belongs to all of us. I hope that answered the question.
Absolutely.
Wake up, Lisa.
I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
absolutely here. I actually had a question along those lines. I'm going to jump to real quick. So you've been quoted as saying that your greatest honor is the title bestowed on you by your people, the Tsimshian tribe of Alaska and British Columbia, of culture bearer, one who revives, preserves, and carries on their culture. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah, I never call myself that. Other people do, and I'm happy that they think that way. It was a long struggle too. When I first got started trying to bring it back and asking questions and doing things, I got a lot of pushback from my own people because they were saying, "Well, why do you want to do that stuff? It's all in the past." Even the people who were really religious too were calling me a devil worshiper and all this kind of stuff. Geez, and it was just a lot of heartbreak for me because there was a lot of my own people, not lots, but there were enough to hurt your feelings that all I was trying to do was be proud of my heritage and to help others to understand it a little bit more. So it can be. What was your? I talk so much that I forget your question.
No, the biggest thing, yeah, that's fine. But really what I was asking is, you said that's like your greatest honor of all the work, because you're shown, like, the Emperor of Japan has some of your totems, and Disneyland has your totems, and kings and queens have everybody knows you. And you've really been a great culture bearer for not just Tsimshian, but Alaska Native and Pacific Northwest Native art and culture. So you've talked about how that is really like the greatest honor. So what does that mean to you is what I was asking. What is that title, the fact that that's bestowed on you, what does it mean to you?
This man, his name is Albert Bolton, but his Somalia name is Amash. And he gave me his brother's name, Nugachishmask. It means works with the cedar bark. And this guy was a huge influence on me in my when we were just trying to get things going, at home. And I wanted both my grandparents to be proud of me. Say again your question. Just the last part.
What is that title?
Oh, hey, I get off. Yeah, you guys can laugh at me if you want to. I get off on tangents and I forget what I was going to say. To be a culture bearer, to be called a culture bearer, the reason I put the picture of my grandfather up, because he put his hand on my shoulder once when he was watching me carve in my shop, and he pushed down on my shoulder and he said, "That's a good weight." And I said, "What do you mean, Yaya?" Yaya is a shortened version of yes, or and it means grandfather in our language. So Yaya is, So anyway, I said, what do you mean, Yaya? And he said, "What you doing?" This is how he talked. He was great. I loved his accent and everything. I'm not making fun of him when he talked. When I say this, it just, I carry with him every day. These pictures I look at every day. I talk to them and share with what I'm doing. But he said, "What you doing, David? You teaching the people. It's a good weight. Responsibility to pass on the culture is a good weight. boy, I've lived by that. And the other one that he taught me is do what you say you're going to do. Do what you say you're going to do.
Good lessons for anybody.
Yeah. And so, anyway, so I have 3 Tsimshian names that I've been given. The fourth one is just my grandmother. It's a corruption of the word baby. And when I was a little boy, my grandmother would call me Daps. It's just me. It's just David and baby kind of mixed up into her native tongue. And in 1982, I was given the name Schorayok, first to potlatch, because I gave that first potlatch. I was given that by an Eagle clan elder. In 1987, my grandfather gave me his brother's name at the 100th anniversary of our village potlatch. And as I said, that's Nukachishmask, works with the cedar bark. And then last summer, I was given a surprise by my entire clan, the Eagle clan at my village. We had just finished giving a whole bunch of names. It was an Eagle naming feast, and the place was full of people, and I picked up. We have these cedar mats. You stand on the mat when you're receiving a name, and people come in to put their hands on you, and you've given the people representing the other 3 clans all come up and take part, and they say your name, and everybody says your name, and then there's a big gift distribution to pay everybody for witnessing. So I said, okay, good. And I was just about to pick up the mat, and when we were going to finish that part, and I think another group was going to dance. I'm not going to answer that. Hang on, I'll call back. But anyway, so my son says, wait a minute, David, or Dad, wait. And they had got this secret plan to give me a name. And they wrote this song. My son and these others wrote this. It'll stop in a second. They wrote this song, and they gave, and the entire clan came up to the front of the hall and stood behind me, and they gave me the name Tsimshian, grandfather of totem poles, because I've made 80 totem poles in 41 years, and I didn't know anything about it. It was a complete surprise, and so those 3 names, they're potlatch names. I only use them in ceremonial times. Big honor, big surprise, considering the path and the bumpy road that I had to take to get to where we are now. And I'm really happy that the people of my own people give me that honor. I'm very humbled by that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Anyway, let me tell you, names are really important. Lots of Native people don't have names. It's just the way it is, and it's too bad. But lots are getting names now in potlatches and things like that. A name made you a human being. It made you. It gave you status. And what you did with that name was up to you, and how important. How you live your life either makes that name a real good, strong name, or a bad one, and so when it's time, all of us are the canoes by which our life and name travel, and what the name doesn't actually belong to you. You're holding that name, and that name lives past you. So in the future, that name is going to be passed on, or those names. I've already been talking to my son about who we should consider in my clan relatives, or just clan people that are earning these things, who would be getting these names. Hopefully I'm going to live another 20 or 30 years. I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to be 70 pretty soon. So I've already got some ideas as to who's going to get those names. And my life in a way that so they'll be good, strong names and will be when they're ready to be passed on. And then it's the responsibility of anyone getting a name to make their name good. My wife's name, I gave her the name at her sister's potlatch a couple of years ago. Her name is Heideskumskiek. It means house post of eagles. What that means is she's the foundation of that house. Holds up that. And she really is. Her whole family goes to her to host family gatherings and things that are important. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go on to your next question.
Actually, this is a great segue because we've been talking about your family and you brought it up a few times. So Brianna's last question was, you spent 3 months working with your son on an amazing piece of art for the National Museum of the American Indian. Can you tell us a little bit about the story it represents? What were some of the emotions you felt while creating this piece with your son?
I really love working with David Robert, my boy, my oldest boy. I have 4 sons. 2 are my own sons, and 2 are my wife's sons. But I call them all my sons. They've all worked with me on totem poles or other projects. Dylan is my apprentice right now. You met him.
I met him.
He's in the house. He's having lunch in the house right now. But he's carving.
He's the reason that David is on right now, because he was David's tech support on site.
Yeah, it's, this is my technology.
Yeah, flip flow.
Everybody in my family has just been bothering me to get a smartphone, and I said, well, I'm not smart enough to have a smartphone. But anyway, so now I forgot what we were saying.
We were talking.
What was it like for you to create the piece for the National Museum?
Years ago, David and I, his name is Gibam Lacha. It means wolf of the sky. Just to let you know, I like that. I'm just real happy about that. Anyway, he and I were out in Washington D.C. at the Museum of the American Indian, and we were part of an art show, and we had a table and some art pieces and things like that. And it just so happened that the director of the museum came to look at all the artists in the art show and all that stuff. And we were talking, he and I were talking, and there was this big column just to the side of where my table was. And I said, boy, wouldn't that be great to have a totem pole right there? So 2 years later, they called me on the phone and said, would you still like to put a totem pole on that big column? And we'd like to hire you to do a totem pole. And of course, I was excited, and we got the tree and did most of the carving in my shop when I was living across the peninsula, across the Sound here, and carved 90% of it there. Then we shipped it out to Washington D.C. And David and I went out there, and they wanted us to finish the pole so people could watch us in the museum. And we did, and during the time that we were carving, or actually it was all finished carving and painting, we were on, what do you call it, streaming? Mm-hmm. Computer, there was a camera. Anyway, there was this big atrium. It's like 3 stories in the main part of the entrance of this museum. And there was this camera way up in the 3rd level or so, and it was on us all day long. And a couple of friends of mine who are natives, who are school teachers in Metlakatla, I think 1st grade and 3rd grade or something like that, I can't remember. But they had that video on for their students the whole 2 weeks we were carving. And so every once in a while, would receive a text from those teachers saying, wave, the kids want you to wave. So we'd look up at the thing and wave, and then she'd text back and say, the kids are waving at the monitors. So I'm saying that to say this: we had a lot of media attention. We were on newspapers, television interviews, stuff like that. And for 2 weeks, very proud to say, my little village, the name Metlakatla, and our people in Tsimshian was going around the world for 2 weeks. You know, and I'm more proud of that almost as much as having that totem pole and Tsimshian totem pole in the Museum of the American Indian. But having my son and working side by side with me, it's very gratifying. It's, you know, and he worked with me to make that house front that we did for the Sobolov Center for Sea Alaska. That took us 6 months to do that. And we had a couple other young carvers apprenticing with us or working with us for that too. But did I answer the question, Jake?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. Let's see.
But it was, you know, it was really, and you can see the video. If you go online, you can see that video of that pole and the installation and the dancing, and it's on the, it might be on my website, but I'm for sure on the Smithsonian's or the Museum of the American Indians website too.
Yeah, we can definitely look that up. Jacob, you're up next.
Actually, I figured let's get Isabella, so let her ask a couple of questions.
Sure. So I think one of my questions that we could transition into is similar to Brianna's last question. So I'm sorry, I'm still finding it. I actually I found a lot of articles and information about your son, David Robert, from news outlets all over the States and, of course, a lot in Alaska. And so you started talking a little bit about the process of teaching him and working with him a lot. And so just could you speak a little bit more to that? And if you've done any other teachings about your art and art style to people outside your family?
I've taught a lot of classes over the years. I'm going to be teaching one in January, virtual, my very first virtual one. I mean, David is good at that. He's done a lot of that kind of thing. So he's going to be my technical advisor. But I'm going to be doing a Zoom design class in January, mid-January for a number of weeks. But
with Dylan's help.
Yeah,
right?
with Dylan's help and Davy's help, long distance and that kind of thing. They've already got a full class, so they tell me there's a dozen people already signed up and waiting for that too. So that's not until January. It's through Ketchikan, the Totem Heritage Center in Ketchikan. But Davy, let me tell you about Davy. You can't tell I'm proud of him or not, but that's okay. When he was 4 years old, I was carving in my shop, and he came into the shop, and he said, "Look, Dad, look, Dad," and he showed me this piece of paper, and it was a guy. With you looking at me, like it was a guy in jail, and he's standing there looking through the bars like this, right? And it was, it was a 4-year-old's drawing, but it was pretty good for a 4-year-old, and he's looking like this. And I said, "Oh, that's nice, son." And I put it down, and I went back to what I was doing. He said, "No, Dad, no." And he turned it around like this, and it was the same guy looking through the bars from this direction. Now, how does a 4-year-old know? And I have this big bin, this plastic bin of all my kids' stuff. You know how parents do. I call it the good box. And anything my kids would make from, when they were growing up, and little projects and drawings, I'd stick in there, but I can't find that drawing. I don't know what I did with it. I just kicked myself, because if a book is ever written about my son, and I'll bet there's going to be, because I think he's going to be the very best art people I've ever had. He calls me, in fact, I was talking to him a little while ago. He calls me almost daily to show me what he's doing and asking me for help or whatever. He doesn't need my help. He's just so good. But it honors me that he asks me. He was 6 years old when he carved his first mask with me.
Wow.
I did a lot of it, but he worked on it. And, he sold his first mask for $75 for when he was, I think it was 1989, something like that. He was just a little boy. And yeah, now you couldn't get $7,500 for a mask that he would do now. But anyway, he just really, it's really been a pleasure. Now, I've gone off the track again as to why you asked me that question.
That was a pretty broad question, just kind of about your experience with him and teaching him.
Oh yeah, and you want to know about other.
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
and I've taught a lot of classes. I haven't had a lot of long-term. One of my disappointments, I think, is I haven't had unlike some artists, there are a few that I could mention who've had artists who are really good in their own right come to work with them for 2 or 3 years, which is really that's the best way to do it. And I've had people come for shorter periods of time, but not really for long periods of time. And I'm really happy that Dylan is working with me basically as long as he wants to. And his work is gradually improving, and he's really enthusiastic. And like he and his brother have, they've helped me on totem poles and some things we've done, larger panels and stuff like that. But I like teaching. Both David and I really consider design the foundation of our art, because there are so many artists, and there are lots of artists up and down the coast, lots from all the different tribes. Some people, they get to a certain point and they start selling their work, then they stop learning, and it shows in their work, and they're fooled by the people who are buying their work, basically by you get to a point and then there's no more growth, and where I'm doing this 41 years, and I try to be learning all the time. I want to get better. I don't want people to ever say, well, gee, that wasn't very good.
Wow. That so for the virtual class, immediately I think that would be harder for the students and the teacher, at least compared to face to face. How do you anticipate
I
it?
know. I'm really good at. I'm not good at. I enjoy one-on-one. Here's your paper, and you're looking at what I'm doing, and this is how you do it, and let me see what you're doing. Yeah, I've never done that before. I've never done a virtual class.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be an experience. And that's why I'm going to lean on Davey, my son, because he's done this before and he can tell me the technical. He passed on this machine that I've got that is kind of like projects up to the onto a screen. It looks down at what I'm doing, and I can be drawing like that, and it shows up on the screen. So when I have a class, I had one not long ago, design and box class, and I did that. So I'm going to do that as well as, so that the people like we are now will see me. I don't know. It's going to be an interesting experience. So we got a dozen people. I'm hoping that I can get to all of them, and
You could always. I know you'll need Dylan
for 7 weeks.
You might need Dylan and Davey for support, but I think there'd be a really big base for YouTube for you to show some of your creative process and teaching. That's probably the biggest medium in the world right now. My husband is learning lock picking right now while he's home on leave, for example. But I think it'd be a really great way to share that cultural knowledge and artistic knowledge through that medium. And I'm sure your sons would be happy to help you set it up. Just really being videotaped.
I'm not worried about that at all. I hope that what I hope is that, like you, the students who are watching me from from far away, from Alaska or wherever they're going to be, will get something good out of it. I don't want to short them. I want them I want them to say, oh, this was worth my time and my investment.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next question?
Jacob, you want one? Or Isabella, you want to keep going?
Sure, I can keep going.
Good.
So also during some research, I read some things, just like in early life, you did some coaching and like teaching. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to school. I went to college in Seattle to be a school teacher and a basketball coach. That's why I went to. That's why I went to college, was to be the only way I could. Actually really just wanted to be a basketball coach. I wasn't really as serious about being a teacher, but it was the only way I could be a coach was to get a job as a teacher and then coach. You know.
What did you teach?
I taught health and PE and social studies and art, but mostly social studies and PE. And I taught 9 years in Metlakatla, 2 different stints that totaled about 9 years, and then I taught 3 years in Washington State. I'm gonna tell this lady I'll call her back. Hang on 1 second. Hello. Hey, listen. I know. I gotta call you back. I'll explain later. Okay. Thank you. Bye.
You're in demand, David. You're in demand.
It's a gallery owner. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it's something that I can do to pay my light bill. You know. So, what was the question?
So after being a teacher and being a coach for a while, and then transitioning into making your art and your passion your career, oftentimes I hear about artists and how that can be just so taxing. You do what you love, but you have to work so hard at it, and it can just get exhausting. So do you have any difficulties staying motivated?
No, not at all. I hope I can answer this question without losing track of the question. I love every day. I have about a 10 or 11 or 12, depending on how fast I'm walking, commute steps from the back door of my house down to my shop. I look forward to it every day as if it was the first time. I love to create. I love to make what I make. You know, I just enjoy it after all these years, you know. And 1986. Oh wow, you guys switched spots.
Yeah, my connection went away for a second, so it made me rejoin the meeting. So now we're all, you know.
Well, anyway, is that snow? Is that snow behind you, Jacob? Is that snow?
Yeah.
You're muted, Jacob.
Sorry about that. My room is a little bit underground, so yeah, that's a layer of snow out there in the backyard.
There's so much here.
Oh man, really?
Whereas
it's going to be.
It was like 80
anyway.
here today, like legit 80 degrees.
It's getting chilly here. It must be in the 60s here. I don't know, or 50s. No. Okay, so I forgot the question.
Just about being an artist and doing what you love every day.
Yeah, and 1986, I had been doing art for 5 or 6 years, teaching school. I built a ice cream parlor bakery for my wife at the time, because she kept kicking me out of my workshop and having donut sales in my workshop, and I would lose my space.
Wow.
I got tired of that, so I built her a place called the Sweet Shop, and it was really a great place. And we bought this place. We bought out an ice cream parlor in Seattle, cut it all up, put it in a container, and shipped it up to Alaska, and built this building. And so I was a school teacher, ran this business, and I was carving, all full time. So eventually I couldn't do it all, you know, and the art became more and more important to me, and I had two little kids. And so one day I decided, I went into the principal's office, and I dropped my keys on his desk, and I said, bye. I'm going to go be an artist full time. I would not do that now if you put a gun to my head. But at the time, it was a different world. Economics were different. opportunities. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I sold the business, the other business. Actually, sold it 3 times till somebody finally bought it, and it turned into a home instead of a business. Which sad. I wish I had not done that. Now I wish I had kept the place, so I could pass it on to my kids. But at the time when we moved away, I moved from Metlakatla to Seattle with my family, and I was just really fortunate. I almost immediately started getting totem pole commissions, and that really financially was that's the only way you can do it is people to to buy your work and to make it as an artist. It's just a lot of work, and you end up doing all of this work alone in your shop 90% of the time. People don't see you doing all this stuff. They just see the final product,
That's why you got to stream it on YouTube so people can see you doing it. And then you'll get more commissions because they'll be like, wow, that's awesome. I want one.
It's there's a saying, I'm paraphrasing this, but I believe it was from an artist, but they were talking about how in order to be successful at something that you love doing, you have to be, obsessed with it, to a point that, some people would say, oh, well, that's unhealthy. It's like, well, but that's kind of what it takes sometimes is you got to be really obsessed with it and keeping at it. And you love it so much that it kind of takes priority number one over most things.
Yeah, you have to really love what you do. You have to really. And one of the biggest things that I've been very fortunate around is that I've been integrally involved in the rebirth of my culture, and so my artwork and my ability to make art dovetailed with my desire to recreate our culture again. Not just me. I'm not the only one. There's lots of them have been doing that. I've just been real lucky enough to be a part of it. Been one of the paddlers in the canoe kind of thing. So, yeah, you put those things together, and you do have to have a fire. You definitely gotta love it. Otherwise, you get tired. Lots of people come and go over the 40 years. Guys, they're gung ho for a while, and then and you don't hear from them anymore. You don't see them. They're just decided that they couldn't make it, or something else interested them, or something.
I have a bit of a segue to one of my questions about what you're talking about. You've done extensive research into your people's culture, your stories, your art, all of that, like we talked about. Can you talk a little bit about what that extensive quest for lost knowledge has been like for you, like the difficulties and exciting new discoveries when you were finding it all out on your own?
Well, let me answer that first by saying, when you try to revive a culture, if there's something left, then it's easier than if there's a vacuum. Where with me, there was a vacuum. There was nobody that I could talk to. The elders that I grew up around, subsistence, they were great at subsistence, gathering, fishing, hunting, all that stuff. And that older, my grandmother's generation, I learned the language from listening to them. I used to follow my grandmother around when she went to visit her friends, and she'd take me with them and put me in the corner, and I'd eat a popsicle and listen to them talk or whatever. And but if it wasn't for that, and it gives me all my the knowledge I just kind of absorbed secondhand, I guess you could call it. Okay, I forgot what you were asking me again now.
Well, really, I was asking about like what kind of, during that extensive quest for lost knowledge, like what were we talked a little bit about the difficulties there with the vacuum, but what were the exciting new discoveries? I know you watched some old silent movies, you went to museums, your self-taught discovery of culture. What was the coolest part for you, and what was the hardest part maybe?
It hasn't stopped. The coolest
Right.
is ongoing. I'm working right now with the Museum of the Museum of Natural History in New York. I'm a consultant. They're redoing the Northwest Coast Hall, and I first saw it when my son my kids were tiny. I went out there to visit, and I walked into the hall. I took, I don't know, 1 or 2 steps into the hall. It's a big, long hall and a whole bunch of cubbies all the way down, that different tribes were represented all the way down this hall. And I couldn't go in. I could not take another step. It felt like the air turned to jello. I was so emotional. And I backed up out of there. I couldn't believe that all of our art, all of our, this cultural stuff was in this place. I'd never seen it before. So I went and looked at dinosaurs and other stuff for about an hour. And then I came back and I took a deep breath and I walked in, and I was like 3 or 4 hours it took me to get from that end to the other end. And so now, kind of coincidentally, now I'm this representative of my people with a bunch of other Native consultants, and we've had a number of in-person meetings, and now because of the COVID, we're having these Zoom meetings, and it's about a year or so away from opening again. But it's going to be fabulous because the museum, the Hall of Northwest Coast, it was really dark and it was poorly labeled, and there was some beautiful things, but they were hard to see, and it hadn't been updated for like 100 years. But now it's going to be just absolutely amazing, you know, and because they've got this, everything's going to be high tech, and they're going to have videos and showing the people that we're still here, that we're doing things still, potlatching and dancing and carving and things like that. So anyway, we have things like that, and the journey. For me personally, I don't want to harp on this, but for me personally, the hardest part was sometimes my own people. You know, the opposition or ignorance or things like that, or Christianity. You know, that kind of influence. You know, there's been a lot of. I was sitting in church one time when my kids were very small. Sunday school, and the minister was our Sunday school teacher, and I sat down in one of the chairs there, and we were just about to have Sunday school before church, and I was good friends with the teacher because his basketball coach. We had a church basketball team that I coached and played with, and he said, "Hey, Dave, how you doing? What's going on? How's the totem pole carving?" You know, and he was a pretty good guy about things like that too. Anyway, the lady right behind me said in a low voice, kind of looking down, "Devil worship."
What?
Felt like somebody hit me on the back of the head, you know. And I got up and I left. And I was walking down the street. I was walking down the street from the church. I don't remember if I had tears in my eyes or what, but I was really upset. Preacher came running out after me and brought me back. He said, "Oh, don't pay any attention. She's ignorant." I said, "Yeah, but this is 1988 or 1986 or something. I forget what it was." And I said, "This isn't 1886. You know, why are people so ignorant about this kind of stuff?" And it still happens that way too. You know, here's another example, and I'm probably going off the rails again. Forgive me.
We love your off the rails answers. The point is, we learn lots about you.
I did a totem pole for there was this elder Tsimshian man who taught for years at the University of Dubuque in Iowa. Is Iowa? Yeah. And we went out there and I did a totem pole, and we did this. I took 4 of my apprentices. We went out there and we sang and we danced and we dedicated this totem pole. And a couple of my apprentices, you ever heard of the movie Field of Dreams?
Absolutely.
Kevin Costner movie. You're young, you might not have seen that.
If you build it, they will come.
They will come, yeah. But anyway, not far away from this place is that field. It's still there. It's really a tourist place. So these guys went to that place and to see it, and of course there was a gift shop. And on the wall in the gift shop was this plastic covered toy, and it was a cowboy and an Indian and a totem pole. Cowboys and Indians never had totem poles. You know, the
No.
Plains Indians never had totem poles. Totem poles are from my culture, from the
Yes.
Northwest coast, you know, from the 6 major totem pole tribes. It's basically the 6 original totem pole tribes. So, when I was 10 years old, I got a Christmas or birthday present. It was called Fort Apache. So I opened it up, and there's a whole bunch of little soldiers and a whole bunch of little plastic Plains Indians and plastic fort and sagebrush and cactus and totem poles. So I was 10 years old. So the bridge to this last thing at Field of Dreams, nothing changed. That's still, you know, people think totem poles, just because you're Indian, you have a totem pole. You know, it's just crazy.
No.
But anyway, that has nothing to do with your question, but the struggles with trying to pass on a culture that has been ravaged by rules and laws and churches and ignorance. It's hard.
It's ongoing.
It's hard. But I told David, I said, you know, we're doing this for the right reasons. And even those who don't agree with us, we're doing it for them too. I hope I answered that question. I don't know if I did or not.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and that kind of stuff, I mean, I would say is still especially relevant today with a lot of the movements going on and people talking about civil rights. And, you know, I mean, historically, I would just say in my experiences here in America, we do kind of have a problem of grouping different cultural groups together. You know, we did that. You know, we have people who do that with Japan and China, even though those are 2 very different countries. You have people kind of saying, "Oh, well, they're all the same anyway."
Yeah.
And so, you know, we think we're past it, but really, in terms of history, when we look at it, we are really now kind of getting to this space of educating ourselves and other people kind of revitalizing their long lost culture, such as yourself, and kind of really saying stuff like, oh, you know, maybe there should be civil rights, or maybe we shouldn't be racist, or maybe we should be more nuanced in our perspective of other cultures. We're really kind of just now doing that.
Jacob, you had a question that's kind of a follow-up to what we were just talking about. Your number 6, if you want to ask him that, I think that would be great.
Yeah, so David, in your biography entry on the website for Native Arts and Cultures Foundation, you said, I have much more to learn and create and will listen to the old voices tell us, create us again, use us again, celebrate us again. And so as a follow-up to what Lisa was talking about, my question was, with all the work and research you've had to do to discover and revive your traditions, what has it been like helping other tribes regain, do the same? And have there been any particularly interesting traditions that caught your attention?
I'll be right back to answer that.
I love it. So much character and personality and flavor that goes so much deeper than just art and, you know, what we conceive of as culture, which I think is the whole point of interviews like this.
I don't know if you could see this at all. I don't know. Can you see these pictures?
Yeah, a little bit.
I did this 40-foot or 35-foot totem pole for the Sklallam tribe over on the Olympic Peninsula. And my son David was six years old. You can see him in some of these pictures with me. And there he is, and that one there. I don't know if you can see that one sitting on the log with me while I was carving. But the village there, they had lost everything, their culture, their language, everything. And the chief of the tribe, the chairman of the tribe, asked me if I would carve this totem pole, and I said, okay, this is what I charge. And he said, oh, we can't afford that. We've got $7,000, and that's basically the tax on a totem pole that I would make at that time. At that time, but I was so excited. A book has been made. I was going to go get the book, but I forgot it. It's in the house. Anyway, these pictures were anyway. That's from that project, and that got that tribe started. They built a carving shed, and these half a dozen or more carvers started to carve regularly, and they hired to oversee a totem pole longhouse project. We carved these. We carved this big screen, killer whale screen. Went inside their longhouse when it was built, and we did 4 totem poles. I taught them how to do the poles, and they look like Tsimshian totem poles a lot, but because see the Salish people really did have the monumental totem poles that our northern folks had. They had smaller house posts and things like that. But I got to be really good friends with that village, the people in that village, and real proud of the relationship that I had with them for years. 30 years I've was worked with them, and that really stands out for me, having that relationship. And I've had the opportunity to pass on things like you were saying earlier, Isabella, the passing on things to other tribes, to teaching classes. I've found out second and third hand how much of an influence I was. I didn't realize that I was being to these up and coming people, and those are really satisfying kind of things. You all know what blood quantum means, huh?
Yes.
Blood quantum.
No.
It's what percentage of you
Oh, yes.
are Native or African American or
Right.
Asian or whatever. You know that Native American, that word, Native American, First Nations, or some of our
First
own people, they were Indians, and we're the only indigenous group in this country that have to prove our blood quantum. That's a pretty sad thing to say.
The people in Hawaii
if you're a quarter Native, into to some of our own people, you're not Native.
Yeah.
If you're a third, unless you're half or more, you're not really Indian to some people. But to others, like me, you are what your mother is, or your father. My boys, their mother is white. Their father is Tsimshian. My boys are Tsimshians. And that blood quantum, that having to prove how much Native you are. Like my son is very fair, and his girlfriend, she's very fair, but both of them are about as Native as you could be. The arts, the putting up with food, the learning the language, the dancing, the singing, they might as well have been born in 1850.
I think in Fairbanks,
So,
there's a lot better revival for that because of the guys, help me out. The Circle of Chiefs, you know what I'm trying to say?
The native.
Well, not just that, but yeah, there's quite a bit of that, and there that's like nobody has to prove being native there in
it's
Fairbanks.
a lot less than it used to be, but it's
Yeah.
still
Oh yeah, it's still a
thorn.
factor.
It's still a thorn. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm keeping you guys. You got to go to class and all this stuff. So
Well, we don't, but we have more questions for you because we want to pick your brain about a bunch.
well, ask me the questions,
All
and
right.
then I'll give you a little tour of my shop.
Perfect.
Here.
Hey, I have a bit of a segue there too. It states in your profile piece from the First People's Fund that you consult for people all over the world on the meaning of stories behind various works of art. Can you talk a little bit about some of those stories that you've found and interpreted in some of these works of art outside of your own Tsimshian culture and that you might have interpreted for other people around the world?
I don't know where they got that one. I'm not real familiar with that.
Well, have you done? It's basically that was the First People's Fund. It was talking about that you work as a consult, as a consultant for different people behind the meanings and stories behind various works of art. So,
well, only pieces that I might have done for and with people, like you said, Disney World and Knott's Berry Farm, and Microsoft and
right.
stuff like that. I've had opportunities to do that, but I don't remember saying that to anybody. Sorry.
Well, maybe they made it up. That is, in print doesn't mean it's true.
No.
So,
Well, actually, this is a great segue into one of my questions. And so in the class that we've been taking, we've been looking over the concept of tradition. And the reason this is kind of great segue is because you brought this up with about, who is a native defined by blood or defined by who raised them, essentially. And so we actually, I think this is a great question about, what are your views on what makes something traditional?
That's a really good question. I think that's probably the best question I've heard today.
good job, Jacob.
Because we make tradition. When the very first potlatch I gave in 1982 in my village, nobody knew what to expect. Nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew, about potlatches. Like I said, I had never. I just knew the basic tenets, the rules that I had to follow, the three main rules. I knew what that was supposed to be. But not that would say again your question, because I want to make sure I start rambling. Eh?
We're just, we're asking your views on the concept of
Tradition.
Tradition.
Here, it's my belief that we make tradition. It's traditional in my village now to have potlatches. It's traditional to wear button robes and headdresses and to sing in our language. It's traditional now. It wasn't when I was a kid. There was nothing. And this whole generation, the people in their from 40 on down, it's tradition for them to be in a dance group or those kind of things. I'm talking about ceremonial kind of things, but also it's a continuity with fishing and hunting and smoking fish and preserving berries and and stuff like that, which is really a strong thing in my village. There are people in my village in Metlakatla and other, I'm sure, native villages all over the Northwest Coast, where there are certain people who are really good at that, and everybody kind of relies on them to either do it or teach it, and that's tradition. That kind of tradition has never really stopped. But the tradition and the pride in ceremonies and singing and dancing, that went away, but it's been revived, and it's become. We make tradition. That's my answer. Just a great question. I'm just really happy you asked that, because that's been my life for 40 years is to bring back tradition, so people are proud of who they are. When I taught school in my village, I taught a 9th grade Native history class. I created the class, and I asked the school district, can I teach this? And so I taught 2 semesters, 2 groups of 9th graders. I get half of them for half the year and half for the rest of the year. Very first thing I say to them, once they were sitting there all ready to go, how many, in my tribe is killer whale, raven, eagle, and wolf. There's four clans. Everybody belongs to one of those. Whatever your mother is, that's what you are. So I say, okay, raise your hand. How many killer whales? And the students will go like this,
Mm-hmm.
And how many eagles? They look at each other, Same thing with the other 2. And then I'd say, okay, are you proud? Yeah. Nudging each other. Yeah, we're proud. Yeah. Why? Why are you proud? No answers. Because at the time, I was teaching classes in the 80s. There was nothing in my village. The culture was no, I can't say there was nothing. There was a children's dance group that started in the mid 70s. That was only like 5 or 6 years before I had this class. And one of the things that is like what I said to my grandfather. My grandfather said about it's a good weight. It translates to, you can't be proud unless you do something to be proud of. I suppose that could be in any culture. So I tried, to get them to understand, either learn our language, learn how to dance, learn how to carve, learn our history, preserving foods, being a good hunter and fisherman, all of those things. As my son David would say, it's not just hoo-ha, meaning it's not just dancing and beating on a drum. Mm-hmm. That isn't culture by itself. It's part of it. So being proud of who we are requires us to live who we are and teach who we are and pass it on. And yeah, that's my answer.
So Isabella and I have
tradition.
Yes, it is a great question. And it was actually the first section that Daka brought to our attention when we started this anthropological research into Alaska Native art. He's an artist and an anthropologist, and it's really interesting, very thought-provoking for us. And I'm really glad that Jacob thought to bring that question to you as a culture bearer. That is a perfect mix. Isabella and I each have a question that are very similar. Do you mind if I kind of put them together, Isabella? Because they're kind of, yeah, okay. So what I was going to say is you've been prolific in the different types of artistic expression you've created. Yeah, totem poles are what you're maybe most known for, but bentwood boxes, masks, rattles, drums, songs, dances. And for her part of it as well, during a lifetime of art, you've created close to 100 totem poles from our research. How does your thought process and artistic process differ between those 30-foot carvings and the smaller carvings like the masks? And do you have a favorite of your artistic expression?
You guys ask really good questions. Try to keep me on track, okay? With my answer.
We'll try to keep you honest.
Stop me and say, wait, that's not what I asked. As a working artist, the most important objects that I have created over the 41 years I've been doing this have been pieces that have been made for what they were made for 100 years ago or more. That totem pole I did for my grandfather's 1994. Well, the first one I did for my grandmother, I guess, was really important. But the one I did for my grandfather was part of that 4-day potlatch that we had in my village. that's the number one important pole. The second most important pole was the one I did for my wife's sister, who passed away of cancer just a few years ago. And we had a big potlatch for her. I don't know if you can see that, but that's the pole.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's gorgeous. I wish I could see that
Right
in
here,
person.
it's standing in front. It's standing at the entrance to a hospital in Seattle. Yeah. But anyway, all my boys all worked on it with me. They were, you know, and my wife and her mother helped paint it.
Yeah,
Well, I've made lots and lots and lots and lots of artwork for galleries, for private collectors. But on the other hand, I've made a lot of stuff that's used at potlatch. I've made a lot of stuff that is used that people are wearing, either my designs on their regalia, their headdresses, their drums that they sing with, rattles, you know, lots of stuff that I get such a feeling of gratitude and pride to watch them being danced and used when, you know, when for important things. It's not just on some wall. And lots of my stuff is on people's walls all over the country, and I'm happy about that because it's helped me to survive and, you know, make a success, I guess, of my hard work. But that's two different kinds of success. You know, one is toward furthering the culture and having our people be proud of who they are, and to recognize that totem poles are the signboard by which we tell people who we are. This is who lives here. These are the stories of the people of this house or this village or this clan. And I've had lots of good opportunities to do that. And even the totem poles that I have made for non-native people, and they're all over the place. I mean, I did two this couple of years ago that we took out to Pennsylvania, you know, and to this far out in the away from Philadelphia, and we went out there and danced and potlatched for those totem poles, and the figures on the pole, even though the people who own the poles were not native, was the story of their family. And that's
I love
what
it.
and the totem poles do that. You know, that's what the story is. And the totem pole that's in the Museum of the American Indian is my third favorite, because it I'm really proud that a Tsimshian pole is in that museum, and its story is a good story. The eagle and the young chief, you know, and it's a good lifting up story. And having those opportunities and the opportunities to work with my boys anytime I get to is pretty amazing. I'm going to unplug this. I wonder if now I have to turn it, but I'm going to show you I'm going to show you Dylan. He's working right now as we're talking.
Nice. Hi, Dylan.
Show him what you're doing. He's making a feast bowl.
Very nice.
Can you see that? It's the little one is his model, so he's making a big one like that.
It's a very nice shape.
Thank you.
He's over here working hard.
Yes.
I don't know how many more questions you have, but I'm going to show you do a little bit of a tour here. I don't know what you can see, but this is my little store, boxes and masks and props and galia. But these are pieces that are, that's a bentwood box there. That's a panel. I hope I'm fixing so you can see.
So gorgeous.
There's some boxes.
I love your panels. I would love to have one of your panels, but I can't afford you, David. You're too expensive. You're too famous. Maybe someday.
Well, don't wait too long. Like I said, I'm going to be 70 pretty soon.
Yeah, well, yeah, then it's really going to get
Oh,
expensive after you
there's a-
pass away.
there's
I'll
a-
never be able to afford it. There you go.
Wow. Oh, God.
Those are fantastic.
Well, while you're showing us around, can I ask you just a little bit of a sidebar?
Yeah.
How do you decide what stories, you're talking about the eagle and the chief, how do you decide what stories go on your totems?
Speaking with the people that I'm doing the poll for, sometimes they have very specific wants for, to tell their family stories. Other times, like with the Disney World, the first poll I did for Disney World, I'm going to show you this panel right here. It's all covered up. This is going to be picked up tomorrow, going to a family in Oregon. I don't know if you can see this.
Wow.
Yeah, we can see. That's gorgeous. My mom is a big fan of David's work, and she's watching this video, and she's oohing and awing over here.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can see. Oh, wow. Did you
That's
see that?
stunning.
You just unveiled that. Look at that. That is absolutely gorgeous.
So just a little mask.
Is that a raven?
That's eagle.
Eagle. Yeah, you're right. Mom got it right. She's better at this than me. Then again, she did a lot of research into your actual art pieces.
So then the last thing here, this that I did back in 1999 that I'm refurbishing.
Oh, wow.
So I did it to honor my kids. I'm taking
Oh.
cleaning
Wow.
the gray off of it. So anyway, and then these are little pieces for my show that are coming along.
Mhm.
Gorgeous. It's stunning. Thank you for taking us into the inner workings of your life and your art. Jacob, I know you had a like kind of last follow-up question if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I had one last extra question. And actually, I mean, thank you again for showing us around your workshop.
Absolutely.
It's
Bringing us behind the mask, behind the curtain is absolutely an honor, and to hear the inside workings of what has brought you to this 41-year journey is also such an honor, David. So I do want to say thank you for me, my family, for our class, etc. But Jacob, go ahead and ask him that last one.
well, to give a bit of background. So, for me, growing up in Alaska, in schools, we've had Native Alaskan culture and art has always been kind of an influence in my life. And actually, for me, growing up, my grandfather was also kind of like my dad for me, and he taught me lessons of kind of like living off the land and whatnot. So for me, Native Alaskan culture always kind of had an appeal to me in terms of its, core morals and, its big major points that it has to make about living today. But so my final question on this was, do you have any thoughts or words of advice for those that are not part of any Native Alaskan tribe who would wish to contribute, learn, perhaps take part in the traditions in efforts to decolonize Alaska? So people who maybe, like myself, who are not part of any official tribe
Yeah.
that like to participate in the traditions of like this is
Yeah.
the Tsimshian tribe.
Tsimshian.
And a
Tsimshian.
quick add-on to that also is it appropriate for those of us who do not have that Native background or Aboriginal background like Hawaii, for not my people genetically, but the people that I grew up with, for us to participate? Or do you see that as cultural appropriation, or is that a way to continue that knowledge?
It's a very touchy subject. It's very it's had a lot of over the years, a lot of mistrust has come from people doing things that they probably shouldn't have done. My advice has always been for non-native people who admire and want native culture to live and to they want to experience. It is to be respectful at all times. Try to learn as much as possible. Lend a hand when it's needed. Don't be afraid to participate as an observer to begin with. Learn as much as you can. Ask questions. Be, like I said, be respectful. Understand that our culture, just like lots of indigenous cultures, are under attack all the time, still. And even though it's it's 2020, there's still a lot of negative stuff. And to participate in and appreciate native culture, it's okay. To do it honestly and with respect is my advice. I'm trying to think of how to answer some of these other ones too. There was a group of artists when I first came down here to Seattle back in the 80s from Alaska. When I decided to become a full-time carver, I realized that there was this group of non-native artists who were predominant in the number of galleries. There were quite a few galleries at that time, not anymore, who are doing native art, making a real good living off of native art, but none of them were natives. And they called them the Seattle tribe. It was kind of just kind of a derogatory reference. But then they had their students continue on after them. They're all quite old now, but are older. But then they had others. But I noticed over time, I think I was part of kind of an influence in that direction, but not the only one. That the galleries got fewer and fewer, but the ones that continued realized that they should promote and concentrate on native artists in their galleries and not so much the non-native artists whose only reason for being there was to make a living or make money, which isn't, it's a free country. They should be able to do that. But
not on your back.
I found that the more I learned about it, even though a couple of those guys I got to be friends with, I found myself moving in a more of a direction where I was standing up for and protecting our own culture, our
right.
Our people. And I thought, I guess I'm in a position where on this side of me is my grandfather, and this side of me are my sons. And what am I going to do? Am I going to pass on from him to me to them the pride that I have come to learn about and about who we are, and all of the really terrible things that have happened to our people in the past. And then our language is almost gone, and and stuff like that. And the arts are flourishing, and ceremonies are flourishing again up and down the coast for many people.
Yeah.
So that's my answer. Is that it's a good thing to learn about our culture. It's a good thing to experience it. Good thing to get rid of the stereotypical kind of treatment. I really enjoy looking at other cultures. But I knew that I wasn't a part of that, but I could enjoy it and appreciate it and that kind of thing. I mean,
So you kind of think if I understand that, it's important to remember who you are in the place in relation to these native cultures. Like, don't try to be it, but learn about it and celebrate it and be respectful. But remember who you are in your place in the world as well.
everybody's got something to contribute to this world. You know,
Yeah.
every culture is beautiful. Every culture
Yeah.
is beautiful, regardless of where it originates.
I have a quick just sidebar question because I've been thinking about this the whole time we've been talking. You know, I grew up in Hawaii, you know that. I remember when I was little, there's this place called the City of Refuge in Hawaii on the Big Island where I grew up. And they have some incredible totem poles. And I don't know if you know about the Polynesian culture of totem as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's what I grew up with.
When I went to Hawaii the first time was in the early 80s. I got flown over this Tlingit carver, and I got flown over to Hawaii to participate in what was called a Festival of the Pacific.
Uh-huh.
And they flew us over there with our tools and our little projects we were working on, and we were demonstrating carving. And I was thinking to myself, I was sitting in Ala Moana Shopping Center,
Right.
you know, and there was thousands of people going all over the place, and we were sitting there carving. And I was thinking, I said to this friend of mine, why are we here?
Right.
If I was coming to Hawaii, I'd want to watch the hula girls, not some Alaskan carvers, you know. And but it was a kind of a cool experience. But you know, I was just at the very beginnings of my career, and
Right.
it was an odd experience. It was great, but it was an odd experience. So
I will say though, Ala Moana and Waikiki is not Hawaii. Like where I grew up, it's a much more rural. It's like the only place you've ever seen of Alaska is Anchorage. That's cool, and there's lots of culture, but that's not really Alaska.
yeah.
And the same is true. I mean, it's even more so true when we're talking about Waikiki. That's not Hawaii. The island I grew up in, the area I'm talking about, is a very sacred area, and these totems very much also told the story of the people of that area, of that island. You know, we don't call them tribes, but you know, they are unique people to that island, the island of Hawaii, or the people of that particular area, and that chief and their family. And it just, you know, I remember that as a little girl looking at that and wondering what that story said. And as you've been talking about your totems, it just kind of, you know, it just kind of brought that together. I just wondered if you'd actually seen any of that actually ancient Aboriginal work, not just sensationalized Waikiki version, obviously.
What I was going to get at, and I forgot, as I'm constantly forgetting, I get so off on a tangent. There are old stories, Northwest Coast explorers coming to the Northwest Coast because they went on these journey that took them to Asia, to Hawaii, down South America, and they had these big turns that they made, and they come to the Northwest Coast, and in the Northwest Coast they would take on some native people. Maybe they're carvers or whatever, and they would go with them on these trips. And they when they go to places like, you know, Hawaiian Islands or Tahiti or those places, and then they would take on other natives. Anyway, there's a tool I'll show you.
Mentioned to him, tell him people really feel
Two of the tools we use are called.
I did.
This is a southern style, the Northwest Coast, called a D-adze. It looks like the shape of a D. This is an elbow adze, right? But they're both used for the same thing. It's for striking, for chopping. And I had heard that either the adze was influenced by Polynesian style adze. So that when these ships would come from Polynesia and come to the Northwest Coast, the guys who were on there came from those places, and then they showed our people the ads. But I think it was the opposite. I think that the ads originated with our people and went
Right.
there with natives who went over there. So when I went to Hawaii, I've been to Maui and Kauai and Big Island, Waikiki, that island.
Oahu.
Yeah, wow. I mean, to where that beach is. But
Right.
I couldn't find any artists using this kind of ads. I saw an artist. I saw an artist using ads that were shaped like a T. It had played that way, and he was carving. It was in Lahaina, and on Maui, and he was demonstrating. And you're walking around, and you might see 2 or 3 of those guys, and they're all making basically the same things, but and some of them pretty beautiful art. And it takes so much skill to do that, but I remember being pretty disappointed that I couldn't find these really similar ads and tools that we would use. And I asked the artist, I said this. I had my little phone thing and said, "This is what I make, and these are the tools I use. Do you have these tools?" He said, "No, we don't have those."
Yeah.
Hey, can I ask you? You guys are you almost done asking me my questions?
Yes. We're actually done with the questions. We were just talking story.
I just want to ask each of you, because I appreciate how much time it's been. It's been a long time.
Yes.
But
thank you for your time, David.
Well, yeah, I don't mind. I just want to know if you would tell me, each of you would tell me what you think of this interview.
I think overall, it's really interesting to hear from a person who has, basically had to do all this work on his own. I mean, it kind of reminds me of my grandfather, not in the sense of reviving an entire culture, but in that he had to learn everything kind of on his own. He had to learn to do plumbing. He made his house, basically had to construct his house himself. And so, it is both refreshing and interesting to hear from somebody that's discussing about self-reliance and self-efficiency, and not just for the individual, but kind of relaying that to an entire culture, to entire people, because I think, like you were talking about earlier with cell phones, I think that's actually an important lesson that people are hearing less and less of, which is kind of learning how to be self-reliant.
Isabella?
I think this has been enormously just eye-opening. One thing that you said that stuck out to me was that you found success in being an artist in a few different ways, and one of them being success in learning and sharing your culture and your clan and family's cultures. And I think that's just an enormous personal success that not everyone who enjoys your art all over the world will get to understand as much as you as the artist and your family will understand that.
For me, David, what stood out the most is your comment from your grandfather with his hand on your shoulder saying, it's a good way to share the culture of your people. I have a kind of similar with my grandmother, who told me, never stop looking for the stories of our people, which for me is the Celtic people, Irish and Scottish, which a lot of people in America don't understand. That culture was also, especially in Scotland, suppressed and beaten out and a lot of things by, again, English colonialism. And I just spent a year in Scotland really trying to dig into interdisciplinary Scottish history, Celtic history. And that's actually my degree field. That's what my big goal is to teach my family, yes, but also just the world about the truth that is not known, what the clearances and the mass murder and forcing from their homes of my people. People don't know those stories, and it's important that the world know what the culture really is, and also to bring back the language. I study both Irish and Scots Gaelic, so that I can, like you, revitalize a dying and in some places extinct language of my people. We were forced to not speak that language under penalty of death in Ireland and Scotland for for centuries. So it's a different story. It's a white story, not a brown story, but it is still a story of decolonization now, and a story of revitalization of language and culture, which is a great thing that's happening in Scotland and Ireland right now, but something that as an American and as somebody who wants to educate at the high school and collegiate level, to bring that back. And hearing that from you, and remembering my grandmother saying the same thing, never stop searching for the stories of our people, and your grandmother's story, whatever that means. Ironically, her mom had a sweet shop as well, literally called the Virginia Sweet Shop in Chicago. That's how she made her living to support her babies after her husband died. And she was raising babies alone on the south side of Chicago. So I just thought that was kind of ironic. I see a lot of parallels. And also, it's just been an honor and a pleasure to hear you talk about your family and working with your family and your passion for art and your passion for culture. I think for all of three of us, it's really motivational. I mean, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I see the looks on their faces, and I know for me, it is very much a fire under me to remember my motivation and my drive and why I work so hard and don't get any sleep while I'm 51 years old and trying to finish my degrees. That it's never too late to teach the stories, find the knowledge, and share truth. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
I'd like to end this on my part of this, just to tell you how. I'll give you a phrase. Nini ap lugal ayelt canoe. Dim will jabba khani go dim will jabbo. Lul ayelt canoe. And a lul amagodu. There will ayelt canoe. There will algiagu. Da kwan shagaon. The Suwalayam skit adat. We hail the Amma Walu at the Amma Godu, that's Mgodu, the will not new go na hound. I'm very fortunate to do what I do. And I'm very grateful to have had opportunities to affect my own people in a positive way. And I'm grateful for you to ask me questions. I hope that I answered them in a way that tells you that that what comes from me is honest and true. And I thank you. Oich sism, chanis newsum, du will nach nu go na how you. Thank you all very much for listening to what I have to say.
Thank you. And from my Scottish background, Papa Leif, which is thank you.
Well, I hope that helps you guys all get A's.
Well, that's always a goal too, but I think the search for knowledge is our greatest grade. And thank you, David, again for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, you have a good one.
Okay.
Say goodbye to Bill.
Last words are, I'll teach you a word in my language when we leave each other. Sam Flan. May your names always be good.
Sam Flan.
Sam Flan.
Sam Flan.
Camp Flat.
Right.
Thank
Bye, David.
Bye.